Kia ora koutou, I'm Damon Whitten, and this is the first of 3 mini reports on the findings of the Dyscalculia research that we've been doing over the last couple of months. I've interviewed 16 people about their life experiences, their learning histories, their challenges, their strengths as well, and we're putting that together into a report that will be released soon. And in this particular report, we're going to talk about the school experiences. But before that, I just want to talk to the people who participated in the research. Thank you for participating in the research. I know how weird it is to sit down with a stranger and talk about maths, particularly when maths has been an area that you don't like. Thank you so much for doing it. All of you, when I asked you, said you were doing it. I'd asked you at the start why you volunteered. You were doing it so that children didn't have to go through the same thing that you went through, or to make life better for adults with dyscalculia. So that was great. And I was struck by how open, kind, and generous all of you were. So thank you very much for that. The second thing I noticed was how smart you all are. Able to reflect on the things that happened to you as children, really objectively look at things. Also, I asked you to explain some numeracy thinking, some numeracy or maths that you had to do in the workplace and so on. And I was looking for whether you could kind of conceptually explain that, and you all did. You all absolutely nailed it. So intellectually and conceptually, it's all going on. You've got it all going on. And it was really just the numbers, that are causing you difficulty, and that will come as no surprise to you. But that came through as well. And the third thing that was interesting in interviewing all of you was how completely different you all are. It's amazing. There's no such thing as a typical person with dyscalculia, all very different. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to find the themes, the big things that are the same across all of your stories. And I think I've done that, and I think you'll be really interested in what the findings are, given some of your stories, just to know that other people have experienced similar things as well. Okay, 5 themes that emerged from your stories about school, and just keep in mind that 2 people were homeschooled, 1 person all the way through their schooling, and that's super interesting, and then another person was homeschooled for part of their schooling. Most of you went to school, and the theme that emerged from all of your stories, first theme, was a growing awareness of the difference between you and the other children. And all of you talked about this in the early days at school, beginning to notice that you were struggling with maths while the other children were beginning to get it. And I'll just give you a quote from somebody that I interviewed. This is what somebody said. I think we started to learn how to add. And it took me a while because the teacher would explain 2 plus 2 is 4. And I would, I don't know, for some reason, I could just never get it. 2 plus 2, 2. Yeah, I'd always have trouble with it. And then I'd have to count on my fingers. Those kinds of comments were common. And people also said things like, the teacher would do times tables tests, and some children would answer all the questions, and for some of you who participated, didn't know those times tables or couldn't quickly say what they were. Other people said that the teacher used to go around and go 4 plus 4, 2 plus 6, and the idea was to say the answer quickly, and that those situations, those people began to realize, gee, I'm just not getting this as quick as these other people. Theme number 2 was around trying to survive in class when you were struggling with the mathematics. So most of you described it as though all the other children, or most of the other children, are getting the maths, performing well, and you're struggling, and then becomes this game of trying to hide that you're having difficulties with it. And a lot of you said things like not wanting to look dumb or stupid in front of your friends or the teacher and so on. And then you enacted certain strategies to try to survive in class. Now, these strategies when people were younger were things like copying off other people, remaining really quiet, not making eye contact with the teacher. And then the strategies when people got older, like intermediate and into high school, were things like working out that you could wag. One person said to me that they used to wait until the class got going, and then they would begin to annoy the teacher, and they would be asked to leave the class by the teacher, and they knew exactly how to push the teacher's buttons to get kicked out, go see the principal, but at least she was out of the maths class. So those were the kind of strategies that people were doing. And so that second thing was trying to survive in an environment where you perceive everybody else as good at mathematics, but you were struggling and you were trying not to make it obvious that you were struggling. Theme number 3 was interesting. This was that many of you described being blamed for not being good at maths. So many of you said things like, my parents would work one-on-one, or a particular parent would work with you. Lots of you said that. And then your parent would get mad at you. Sometimes your mum and your dad would then try to intervene, and it created tension in the house. Sometimes the teacher would get mad at you for not understanding it. One person said that the teacher thought that she should have been really good at maths, and she wasn't. And the teacher would get mad at her for not doing her homework and annoyed at her and say, you're not working hard enough. And that was one of the themes. You're not working hard enough. It was kind of your fault, a blame thing for not being good at maths. One person said to me that they got caught copying in class, and they had to work one-on-one with the teacher for 3 days. And the teacher was like going to bring them up to speed, But of course, they still struggled with the maths, so it became this awkward thing, particularly because the teacher thinks that they're not trying hard enough to get it. So for many of you, there was a sense of blame and that it was your fault that you were struggling with numeracy. And that's really tough for a kid, without a doubt. So just so you all know, and I know you all know this, dyscalculia is brain-based. It has nothing to do with how hard you tried. In fact, I think, listening to your stories, you all deserve a Medal of Bravery for making it through school. So let me just read one comment from somebody about being blamed. I had this principal at the time, and he just, it was so embarrassing. He was yelling at me because I couldn't get the maths. I couldn't do it. It was the long division, and I just couldn't get it. And he was going, and then the next minute, he was yelling and screaming at me from everybody. Made me feel like crap. Those kinds of comments were common amongst those people that I interviewed. So, Medal of Bravery, well done all of you for surviving school. The 4th theme around schooling was a feeling of abandonment. And what happened as you all shared your stories with me, it seems like for most of you, teachers, parents, the school institution recognized that you had difficulties with mathematics. And in some cases, people would try really hard to help you. And, you talked about some really good teachers who tried to help and so on. But often there was a sense where it wasn't working anymore. And then you were just kind of left. And it was just like, oh, they're no good at maths, so we'll just leave them alone. One of you described to me sitting in class and the teacher now ignoring you, not asking you questions, and just pretending like you weren't there in maths because you'd been struggling with it, and just moving on. And you said things like you felt left behind, the rest of the class was going on to do great things, and you were sort of stuck there not doing anything in maths. Now, for some of you, that was really brutal, and others of you had other things going on that you could throw yourselves into. Some of you said things like you were really interested in other things, so you just threw your interest into those other areas. But for some of you, that hit really hard. So that idea of feeling abandoned by the system was another big theme. Okay, I want to talk about the 5th theme coming out of school, and this is probably the most negative part of the entire study. So don't worry, the study gets better, but I just need to share this with you. The 5th theme was the way that you talked about yourselves at school. So you didn't talk about yourselves like this as adults now, but when you were reflecting on how you felt about yourselves at the time. And I'm calling this learner identity, or a mathematical identity. That's how you see yourself and the stories that you tell about yourselves. And you said things like this, like, I just thought I was stupid. My whole upbringing, I thought I was stupid. And then somebody else said this, and I always thought I was dumb. Yeah, I was at such and such high school, which was for the dummies. So a lot of you described yourselves as feeling as though you were dumb. And in the research, we have a thing called reifying identity. Reifying is when you say, I am something, like I am smart, I am dumb, whatever it is. And then you have endorsing stories. So you have a story that backs you up. So for a lot of you in school, you'd say, I wasn't smart, or I was with the dummies, that sort of thing, positioning yourself in that way. And then having a story, having a story about how you were struggling to do something. And so it seems like at the end of that schooling, when you're still young, you're developing this negative mathematical identity about yourselves. Now, I should say that changed. For most of you, you now have reflected back on that, and I'll talk about that in a future video. But for many of you coming out of school, you then had this negative learner identity about yourselves, which is tragic, I think. Terrible coming out of school thinking you're not smart and so on, when all of you clearly are. So to sum this section up, the experiences of young children with dyscalculia in the New Zealand school system is not good at all. It seems to have stayed the same largely over many years. You know, people who are now in their 50s and people who are in the early teens, it's the same experience. And it results in people leaving school with a negative learner identity, which is not good. Now, in the future session, or in the next one of these, we're going to look at how things are more positive and people are able to look more objectively at this and develop their strengths and so on. But this piece of research just around school really does highlight the fact that we need to look at this carefully. We need to educate people and make things better. And we're going to look at how to do that in a future session. To all the people who participated, thank you very much. Read the report for more information, and I will be talking to you in a future video.